So, today, what I wanted to speak about is an idea of relating and how we can use that as a concept within our mindfulness practice to improve how we experience our lives. And so, often when we think of relating, we think of relationships. And um, traditionally, relationships are the things that we think of with other human beings. But what we can do is we can expand that conceptual framework to include a lot more and ask ourselves some simple questions. So I'm going to take you through some of the basic questions that we can ask ourselves in order to expand that conceptual framework. So the questions are, what am I relating to? Where am I relating from? And how am I relating? And as we'll see, we can start to use some of the qualities that are a natural byproduct of a mindfulness practice to improve the relationships that we have to all the different aspects of our lives. So I wanted to start with something that I related to this morning when I woke up, which is party animals. Anybody have any party animals that live in their neighborhood? Anybody ever make the mistake of leaving their compost on the back porch instead of putting it in the compost bin? Well, I have. And so now I get to relate to party animals. So there was some raccoons on the back porch having a good time. And I now get to ask myself this question. How do I want to relate to what you see in the picture here? What do I want my relationship to this mess to be like? And if I have a mindfulness practice and I start to apply the characteristics that we traditionally associate with a mindfulness practice, which are things like curiosity, non-judgment, acceptance, then this has less of a chance of ruining my morning, right? Maybe I can make light of it. If I switch gears and say party animals rather than saying, oh my God, I have no time, nor do I want to put on rubber gloves and clean this crazy mess, right? And then we can start to ask ourselves the question, what are the other things that I relate to? What are the other relationships I have? So I have a relationship to this mess because after all, it's my fault, right? So I started this relationship. I also have a relationship to anxiety. I have a relationship to the weather. I have a relationship to social media. I have a relationship to food. I have a relationship to my body and my thoughts. And then the question becomes, how can I improve the relationship that I have with all of these things? And so mindfulness offers us a really good way to start that process. So I wanted to remind everyone that there are really only six things that mindfulness has us being aware of as a practice. And we can do this anytime, not just when we sit down to meditate, but throughout our day. To be mindful or aware of sight, sound, sensation, smell, taste, and what we think of as mind objects. So these are often referred to as thoughts, but can also think of them as emotional content, which is sometimes just a mix of sensation and mind object. So these are the basic things that we relate to. But I wanted to invite you to consider one other thing that we have a relationship to, which is awareness itself. And this is speaking to the question, how or from where am I relating to the things that I relate to? And when we have a deep meditation practice, a deep mindfulness practice, we can start to get in touch with awareness itself. And you can think of this as when you look at a baby who's in its first weeks of life and they're just trying to make sense of everything. They're just in that kind of pure awareness state. We all have this as a capacity, and we can think of it as a skill that we're trying to develop. And we can also think of the things that we relate to as being very close and sometimes overwhelming, perhaps. Like, I don't know if anybody has the experience of relating to things as if they're a wet blanket that's kind of on them. If we think of awareness itself, and we think of spaciousness, distance, um, acceptance, right? So we want to create more spaciousness within our own experience through practicing mindfulness. And going back to this idea of being a child, I wanted to bring up a quote from my daughter. She helped me with this class earlier this morning, and she wanted to make sure that she got credit for this quote. So I had to put her name on there. So when she was 3, she said, "Mommy, I lost my mind." And then my wife said, "You did? Where did it go?" And she said, "It's in my heart." And it turns out that there is science to back up this intuition, which is to say, we have neurons not only in our brain, but we have neurons in our heart and we have neurons in our stomach. So, in some fundamental way, we have 3 brains, not just one. So, this starts to answer the question, how am I relating to things? So we can relate from our mind in a kind of strict, logical, cognitive sense, but we can also relate to things from other places. And mindfulness is a really powerful tool to begin to do that. Another way that I like to, and then some of you may have seen this image before. This is one of my other daughters who made this little bear, and when I saw it, I was just instantly transfixed. And it became kind of a power animal for me. And in the way that I want to relate to the things in my life, like this is the this is the representation of how I want to relate to all things ideally in my life, including picking up my car from the shop today and spending more money than I want to. So I hope that this has been a helpful conceptual framework for you um, to kind of think about the things that are going on in your lives. And now let's do an exercise. And we're going to do pretty simple 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise, which I'm sure some of you are already familiar with. I know that I use this with a lot of my clients. And so to start, I want you to just notice 5 things that you see in your environment right now. So just look out a window, look in your office, wherever you happen to be, and just note mentally 5 things you see. I see a tree. I see a little clock. I see a glass with some pencils in it. I see a roll of tape. I see the computer screen in front of me. And then 4 things that you hear. So you might be hearing my voice, you might be hearing something in the background. Sometimes we can hear air if we're really paying attention. I can also hear the sound of cars in the distance. And then 3 things that you sense. So that could just be something that you're, sitting on. There's pressure underneath you, the clothes that are touching your skin. It could be just the sensation of air touching your face. If you're really paying attention, you can sense that. 2 things that you smell. Now, this can be a little tricky. Sometimes it's just you smell air, but maybe if you're paying really close attention, there's something else that you can notice in what you smell. And then lastly, one thing that you taste. So it could be the leftover taste of coffee or toothpaste or water. So the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is really just grounding us in the present moment. And if you would like, I would encourage you to close your eyes or at least have them halfway shut with a soft focus. And then just grounding ourselves into the breath, noticing the physical sensation of breath coming in and breath going out. And then noticing if we ask ourselves that question, from where am I relating to all of these sensations? And you start to notice awareness itself. You can imagine taking a large step back and noticing things from a sense of awareness. There might be thoughts and the five sensations. Just noticing that there is this other space from which we are witnessing all of it. And even if it's just a brief sensing of this awareness, what is that quality like? Is there just a small sense of spaciousness? And just noting that to yourself, acknowledging that this is a place that you can return to. And if it's helpful, we can return to the breath if we're feeling like there are thoughts that want to take us away from this sense of awareness. And mentally note breathing in and breathing out. You can repeat the process of noting our sense experience, noticing sensations in the body, noticing things that we hear. And then, if it's possible, just returning to this larger space of awareness itself. If it's helpful, you can even just imagine floating up into space, witnessing this endless expanse of the universe. And the awareness that lies within all of it. And when you're ready, you can slowly bring yourself back to planet Earth, back to the place where you're sitting. Can wiggle your fingers and toes and stretch yourself out a little bit. And then open your eyes.